The moment my mother called me a cadet at my brother's wedding, his company commander stopped smiling. We were standing on the garden terrace between the ceremony and dinner when Mom told the bride's relatives, "Avery is still basically a cadet. Noah is the one who made the army a real career." My brother heard her and said nothing. Then Captain Jordan Blake rose from a nearby table, walked straight toward me, came to attention, and saluted. "Major Collins, ma'am," he said. "I didn't know you were Noah's sister." My father's champagne glass stopped halfway to his mouth. Noah looked like someone had changed the rules of his own wedding without warning him. And my mother finally understood that the story she had been telling about me had reached someone who knew the truth. My name is Major Avery Collins. I was 37, an Army engineer officer assigned to a regional mobility and infrastructure planning command. My work was not glamorous. It involved route clearance, bridge assessments, convoy timing, emergency access, and the kind of decisions nobody notices unless they fail. My younger brother Noah was 29 and a first lieutenant in a combat engineer company. To our parents, that made him the real soldier. He wore mud on his boots, talked about demolition training, and had photographs of himself standing beside armored vehicles. I spent more time around maps, route reports, civil engineers, and command briefings. Mom translated that difference into a family ranking. Noah was out there doing the real work. I was still studying. Dad preferred staff track. Sometimes they called me the academic one, as if 13 years of service had somehow become a graduate seminar. For a long time I corrected them gently. Then I stopped correcting them at all. The lie became deliberate 4 months before the wedding. Noah had been competing for a highly visible platoon leader assignment that would put him in charge of a new mobility support platoon. He was qualified, but he had one problem. A safety review from an earlier field exercise showed he had pushed a vehicle column through a route after an engineer warning had recommended a pause. Nothing catastrophic happened, but his commander documented the judgment issue. Noah wanted me to call Captain Blake and put the review in context. I refused. I told him a family member had no business leaning on his chain of command. He said I was acting like a stranger. Mom said I was jealous because Noah's career looked more military than mine. Dad told me, "For someone who loves rank so much, you never seem willing to use it when family needs you." I answered, "That is exactly why I won't use it." 2 weeks later, I learned Mom had begun telling relatives I was still in a training pipeline. She never used the word failure. She was more careful than that. She said things like, "Avery is still doing courses before she gets a permanent command." Or, "Noah is already with a real unit." Both statements were technically shaped to sound plausible and practically designed to make me smaller. The strangest part was that Noah knew better. He had seen my office. He knew my rank. He had once called me from a field site because his platoon could not interpret a civilian bridge restriction and wanted a second opinion. But correcting our parents would have meant giving up the position they had built for him. So he let the story stand. The wedding was held at a restored estate outside Charlottesville, Virginia. Sarah Whitmore, Noah's bride, came from a warm family with no military background. Her parents were curious about both of us and had asked me several questions during the rehearsal dinner. Mom answered almost every one. When Sarah's father asked what rank I held, Mom laughed and said, "Oh, Avery's still moving through all that. Noah can explain the Army side better." I watched Noah look down at his plate. That was when I realized the wedding was not going to be neutral ground. The next afternoon, the ceremony itself was beautiful. Noah looked genuinely happy. Sarah looked radiant. For 40 minutes, I forgot every family argument and simply watched my brother marry someone he loved. Then the reception started. Because Noah's company commander and several soldiers had attended in formal dress, a few guests naturally began asking military questions. Mom loved it. She moved from table to table, introducing Noah as our officer. When someone asked about me, she used the line she had been practicing for months. Avery is still basically a cadet, she said. Noah is the one who made the army a real career. Sarah's aunt smiled politely. I did not. Noah was standing 6 feet away. He heard every word. He still said nothing. Then a chair scraped behind us. Captain Jordan Blake stood. He was 34, Noah's company commander, and one of the officers responsible for that earlier safety review. He walked across the terrace, stopped in front of me, came to attention, and saluted. Major Collins, ma'am. I didn't know you were Noah's sister. I returned the salute. Captain Blake. The terrace went quiet in that strange ripple that happens when one small movement changes the meaning of everything around it. Mom blinked at him. Dad said, Major? Captain Blake looked from them to me. Yes, sir. Then he smiled at Noah. Your sister was the senior engineer planner on the Pine Hollow evacuation. Half my company moved on her route plan. Noah's face tightened. The Pine Hollow evacuation had happened 11 months earlier, after a wildfire jumped a highway corridor and forced 3 rural communities to clear out ahead of the wind. Blake's company had been attached to the movement task force. A county map showed one highway as the fastest exit. Our bridge team found heat damage and a load restriction the public map did not show. I redirected heavy vehicles onto a farm service corridor that added 14 minutes but kept the convoy off the weekend span. 2 hours later, the bridge was closed completely. Nobody called it heroic. It was engineering, timing, and people listening to the warning before the road made the decision for them. Captain Blake remembered because his soldiers had been in that convoy. My parents had never asked. Sarah walked over just as Blake finished speaking. She looked at Noah, then at me. You told me Avery was still in training, she said. Noah opened his mouth, but Mom jumped in. We just meant she does a lot of professional courses. I finally spoke. No, you meant people should think Noah outranked my life. Dad said my name in the warning tone he used when he wanted me to protect the family from the consequences of something the family had done. I ignored it. Captain Blake did not stay for the argument. He gave me a small nod and returned to his table. That made the moment stronger. He had not come over to rescue me. He had simply recognized an officer he knew. The truth had done the rest. Dinner began 20 minutes later. I expected the family to avoid the subject. Instead, Noah found me near the side garden before the first toast. He said, You could have let that go. I asked, Which part? Mom lying or you letting her? He looked toward the reception tent. This is my wedding. And I did not create the scene. He lowered his voice. You know how Mom is. She gets carried away. Noah, she told your wife I was a cadet. He had no answer. Then I asked the question I actually cared about. Did you ever tell Captain Blake I was your sister when you asked about that platoon assignment? His silence answered first. Finally, he said, I mentioned your name once. That surprised me more than the wedding insult. He had accused me of refusing to use my rank for family, then tried to use my name himself. What happened? He told me my record had to stand on its own. I almost laughed. Captain Blake had given him the same answer I had. Noah knew I had been right for months. He still let our parents call me jealous, academic, unfinished, and now a cadet. Not because he believed it, because it protected him from admitting that the person refusing him was not the problem. His own judgment was. Sarah joined us before he could say anything else. She was calm, which somehow made Noah more nervous. She said, I need to know whether this is the only thing you let your parents lie to me about. That was not my conversation to control. I stepped away. The reception continued. There were speeches, cake, dancing, and enough ordinary happiness that the wedding did not become a public disaster. I was grateful for that. I did not want revenge that destroyed Sarah's day. I wanted the lie to stop. During dinner, Noah's best man, Eric, came over looking embarrassed. He said Noah had once told the company friends that I had moved away from command because I preferred classrooms. Eric had repeated it that weekend without thinking. I told him the truth was less dramatic. My current assignment was regional planning, and I still held command authority over an engineering section responsible for mobility decisions. He apologized immediately. That small conversation mattered, because it showed me how far the lie had traveled. My parents had started it, but Noah had carried it into his own professional circle. Every version served the same purpose. He got to be the visible soldier. I became the older sister who had almost made it. The salute had not created a new reputation for me. It had interrupted the false one. After the final toast, Sarah's father found me near the terrace. He apologized for repeating the cadet joke earlier in the weekend. Then he told me something I had not known. My mother had asked them not to put my rank on the family seating display because Noah gets uncomfortable when Avery turns everything into a competition. There it was again. Not confusion. Editing. My mother had been managing the information around me so the wedding would preserve the hierarchy she preferred. The next morning, before leaving the hotel, I asked my parents and Noah to meet me in a small breakfast room. Sarah came too. I put my phone on the table and told them I was done debating intent. I don't care whether you call it protecting Noah, simplifying my career, or keeping the peace, I said. You lied about me because the truth made your favorite child feel less exceptional. Mom started crying. Dad accused me of turning one bad sentence into a family trial. I reminded him it had been months of sentences. Then Noah said, "Stop." Everyone looked at him. He admitted he had known I was a major. He admitted Captain Blake had already rejected the idea of special treatment. And he admitted he had never corrected our parents because their story made his own mistake easier to live with. Sarah did not look shocked. She looked disappointed. That was worse. I told my parents what I needed if they wanted a normal relationship with me. First, they would correct the Whitmores and the relatives they had misled. Second, they would stop describing my role unless I was present to describe it myself. Third, my rank, contacts, and professional relationships were off limits for Noah's career. And fourth, there would be no more jokes about me being a cadet, unfinished, staff only, or not a real officer. Dad said, "You want us to announce that we were wrong?" "Yes," Mom asked. "In front of everyone? In the same places you were comfortable being wrong?" Noah nodded before either parent did. That mattered. Not because it erased anything. Because accountability finally stopped being something he expected only from other people. By Tuesday, Mom had sent a message to the extended family group. It said, "We need to correct something we have said repeatedly. Avery is not a cadet, or still waiting for a real command. She is Major Avery Collins, and we minimized her role unfairly." Dad called Sarah's parents himself. Noah sent me a shorter message. I should have corrected them the first time. I answered, yes. We did not become magically close after that. Real boundaries rarely produce a movie ending. They produce quieter holidays, more careful conversations, and fewer opportunities for people to pretend they misunderstood you. 3 weeks later, Sarah mailed me one wedding photograph. It had been taken on the terrace. Captain Blake was in profile, saluting. I was returning it. Behind us, my mother looked stunned, my father looked confused, and Noah looked like a man watching a story collapse in real time. Sarah had not written anything on the front. She did not need to. I framed the photo and placed it in my office. Not because I enjoy remembering my mother's face. I framed it because the picture reminds me of something I had spent too many years forgetting. You do not have to argue with every person who minimizes you. Sometimes you keep doing the work. Sometimes you hold the boundary. And sometimes The truth stands up on its own, crosses a terrace, and salutes. My parents called me a cadet at my brother's wedding. His captain stood and saluted me. And the only part of that moment I still care about is that, for once, nobody in my family could edit what everyone else had just seen. If your family spent years making you smaller to protect a favorite child, would you confront them during the wedding or wait until the next morning? Tell me your city and your answer below, and subscribe to Velvet Revenge Stories for more original military family betrayal stories about quiet strength, earned respect, and consequences.